Welcome back to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. I'm joined today by our old friend Greg Smith. Greg, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back, man. Always good to be with you guys.
Yeah, and we'll kick things off here. It's been a busy weekend for Nebraska, having the recruiting weekend they had for the Rutgers game, immediately picking up a commitment off the weekend from 2026 three-star receiver Dveyoun Bonwell-Witte, a big body receiver, number two commit for Nebraska in the 2026 class. Pretty big first peer recruiting win for Dayton Raiola. Dayton was also in town this weekend. Put his recruiting hat on after committing to Nebraska a couple weeks ago. And went out and secured a three-star big body outside wide receiver. I guess Greg, what is Nebraska getting here?
Yeah, I think they're getting a kid that has a good ceiling, right? I think that's somebody who's definitely not maxed out. And then it's interesting. I did pop on the board after the commitment, and there was a couple of right away like, oh, I don't understand this one because I think people have to, and I feel like people are just going to keep doing this with Matt Rule and these guys and their evaluations. They do not care. They trust these evaluations. And it feels like another kid that, like, in a few months from now or after the next camp circuit, we're going to be like, oh, Nebraska has that guy tucked away in the class already. Right, as we see him kind of get healthy, see him run some more. But you're right, it just he's another guy that he's got really good size, 6'2", 190, 200 pounds almost. Will continue to get bigger and stronger, but can really stretch the field. And I think that as many of those types of athletes that you can collect, especially from within the region, I think it's a big deal for Nebraska to continue to load up on players like that.
Yeah, and with him, he's missing his junior season practically with a broken knee, but that's an injury that, in terms of obviously a painful injury, but
Yeah.
one that in terms of recovery, you don't really lose much with it, if anything, and he should be on track to just get back to 100%. I don't know if he's going to run track again in the spring, just depending on the recovery timeline, but he's going to be back for his junior season. And again, before the injury, he went on like a nice little camp run, picked up offers from Oklahoma and Kansas State and Nebraska and Minnesota and a couple others, but those all happened in one camp circuit. Like the film was already out
Right.
there on the kid, but he camped really well. And from what we saw from him over the summer too, leads you to believe he'd taken a step from the sophomore year to what he was between the sophomore and junior year. Obviously, we didn't get to see it come to fruition as a
Right.
junior, but a guy that I think again, like kind of Nebraska's buying or getting in on him at the right time. Whereas like you're saying, in a couple months, he's at a level where he's either picking up national offers or he's turning schools away because he's like, I'm locked in with my commitment.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good. I think that that's a consistent place that Nebraska with this staff will be. Right. I think that that's something that I know you and I have talked about the strong evaluation eye of this staff, and it feels like every year now it feels like the first couple we've got a handful of those guys where you're just like, okay, at first you kind of look, you're like, okay, but then you realize that this they know what they're doing and they have a good eye for talent.
For sure, for sure. With the staff too. We're talking evals, and they had a couple guys in town as well. In addition, the headliners, Keenan Harris, four-star linebacker from St. Louis. Nebraska continues to was at the top over the summer. They continue to kind of maintain
Right.
their presence there, and I think getting him on the visit's big. But and just in terms of evals, they brought in a lot of guys this weekend that might not have star rankings. They don't have a whole lot of offers, but a lot of fascinating prospects. One I think that
Mm-hmm.
comes to mind, Mason Black out of Wisconsin, a lengthy just pass rusher in the 2026 class, and he's a guy that, it's not hard to draw similarities to watching him and seeing the way he kind of moves to like what James Williams is doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what James did on Saturday
Perfect.
has to be nice for Mason.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing about the thing that I like, well, there's a few things I like, but one of them that I like about how they evaluate these players is that it's really easy to look at a guy like Mason Black and project him into Nebraska's defense or see someone with a similar skill set, excuse me, in this case James Williams, that they can then mold that kid into, right? And I think that that's something, I think that's really important. I think that that's something that had been missing for years at Nebraska, but it ends up being a thing where not only does it show that the staff has a clear like vision of the types of players that they want, and it makes it easier for them to then go out and recruit, right? Because they know what they want. But then it also gives the kids a really good insight too, right? Because now what I'm sure, without having talked to Mason, I'm sure during the weekend they said, "Hey, watch that number 90 and see what he looks like. We can turn you into that as well." I think that's it's really really beneficial, and you could see he's got just a similar frame and body type to James Williams, and I like that. That seems to be a thing that Nebraska, especially as you look at how difficult it is to get those pass rushers later on out of the portal. If you can identify them early and then develop them in your program, it sets you up, I think, for a lot more long term success.
It's one of those positions that every coach is trying to find someone or find
Right.
more of, and it's real hard to find good ones. So like Nebraska right now, the way they've kind of taken that approach is let's not find them, let's develop them, let's find the
Right.
hidden gems and let's develop into something. The Keona Davis types, like even Nash and Ty, turning them into what they've become. Princewell, a guy they got
Mm-hmm.
on campus. Princewell had 20 plus offers, but I remember like that recruitment because at the time I was in Texas and I was like, why isn't anyone coming after Princewell? Like,
It was
I
such a
understand.
weird one.
And
I
his older,
still will
because
not understand that.
right, and it makes his older brother's obviously doing what he's doing at Ole Miss, but his older brother had a wild recruitment, and it led to maybe Princewell feeling a bit of that, where it's like, oh, we don't want to deal with that type of
Yeah.
recruitment again. But Prince was a completely different kid, and again, the talent was evident. And Nebraska, Matt Rule came in, had a relationship with that family, was able to swoop in and grab Princewell, and it's paying off for Nebraska. He's playing major minutes and a
Mhm.
major contributor. So Nebraska's finding and maximizing what they can at a position
Right.
that everyone's looking for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and if you're going to have a position that you're going to become known for, right? I think that the offensive line, defensive line, I think are the two that would go a long way because it quickly makes everything else look better around your team.
For sure. And other just completely like feels like a Nebraska recruitment again. A guy that doesn't have an offer from Nebraska, but Roman Voss, 2026 athlete, can play a bunch of different positions from Jackson County Central. I want to make sure I got that right, but Jackson County Central. He brought his entire coaching staff and his parents down for the visit.
Okay.
The whole coaching staff's there on the sideline with him. And talking to them, they really enjoyed the time and talked to people kind of close to him who were with him on the visit, and they were like, if Nebraska does offer, I feel like they're going to be way way up there for him just because of the experience he had, and a guy that again at 6'4", 210 can play a bunch of different positions, and 6'4", 210 can play a bunch of different positions. That's been Nebraska's like bread and butter the last 3 4
Right.
cycles, it feels like.
Yeah, the thing is you start to see. I think you're starting to see on the field kind of how that plays into fruition. You see what happened during this game where they kind of switched defenses mid game to kind of stop what Rutgers was doing. The way that you're able to do that type of thing, right, is to be able to have these versatile athletes, and really it happens on both sides of the ball for Nebraska. They wanted, they've talked about before wanting to have that positionless offense as well, and you're starting to see a little bit of it. It just didn't click as well yesterday, but they won the game. But Roman Voss, I think, is another kid too that when you see and you look at some of the offers, and he doesn't have the Nebraska one yet, but we're talking an early offer from Iowa State. He's got Wisconsin and Minnesota, Kansas State, and the reason I highlight all of those schools are those are other schools in the region that do a good job of identifying talent, especially early, and then also developing those guys down the road as well. So I think in this case, that's good company for Nebraska to be in should they go ahead and throw their hat in the ring.
For sure. And I don't think an offer's far off. He just feels so much like a
Yeah.
Nebraska type player. At least Nebraska's got to throw their hat in that ring, unless they've been
And
told.
look at us saying it though. Again, it feels like a Nebraska type player. I think that that's a really good thing that we can clearly identify that that's a
Yep.
thing.
Yep. Yeah. They definitely have an idea of what they want. And you're seeing that again, even like, we talked about it at the top of the show, but we're talking Devion. Like, those are the receivers they've gone out. Like, when they take swings on receivers, those are the guys that go get those 6'2",
Mm-hmm.
6'1" guys that can stretch the field and really run. And guys that have a little positional versatility to them. There's some rawness there that they can polish, and they just seem to have a type at every position now where you kind of know too like what they're going for. As much as they talk about being positionless, you have an idea of what they what
Yeah.
they what they want.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
Speaking of one of the more important positions for Nebraska, big offer over the weekend to 2027 four-star quarterback Trae Taylor, the number 33 prospect and number 4 pro-style quarterback in the country per Rivals. You've seen Trae a couple of times. We both talked to him after the visit. He was honored by by just the fact that Matt Rule offered him in midfield literally minutes before the game. That obviously meant a lot. Seeing the atmosphere, to getting to talk with the coaching staff, all meant a lot. But a kid that, we right before we hopped on here, texted that he's going to be at the
Yeah.
Wisconsin game, so he's already set up a return visit to Nebraska. 27 is a way far off. Nebraska already has
Yeah.
a 25 and 26 quarterback committed. But what is Nebraska looking at here? Like what are the bright spots, I guess, with Trae?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that 27 is far off, but the one thing though I caution him when it comes to quarterback though, you definitely want to get in early, because as you can see by his recruitment already, where it feels like he has offers from coast to coast, right, from the who's who of college football. And so I think that what those teams saw, and what I like about Trae is a lot of those offers came after he camped over the summer, right? Like he went to Oklahoma and camped, they offered him. He went down south Tennessee, they offered him, right? And so what I saw from him in person a couple of times is one, he's got a really nice frame. It still looks like he's growing about 6'2" to anywhere between 6'2" and 6'4" right now. We got to check on that. Has big, broad shoulders. He can continue to put on weight. But when he throws the football, I think the best attribute that he has is throwing the ball on the run and being able to kind of make throws off platform and off schedule if the protection breaks down, which we've seen kind of in some of the highlights from his game so far. And what I really like about him too is that he's got a lot. His best football is ahead of him. Like it feels like, especially the kids that I deal with on a national level, these kids in this 27 class, that are what sophomores, feels like they've already started for a season. Trae in this case has not. Like this is his first year starting on varsity, so he's got a ways to go. I think we're going to see even more growth within his game, which I think is a really exciting prospect for him as he's already checking in at number 33. I definitely think that he's a kid with 5-star potential and someone that could challenge to be the top quarterback in his class.
For sure. And an interesting connection there. I tweeted it, but there's an interesting connection there. So his O-line coach,
Mm-hmm.
former Bears center, Olin Kreutz, uh, played at Honolulu, St. Louis with Dominic Raiola way back in the
Okay.
day. So there's a Raiola connection everywhere. Nebraska's finding
Yeah.
them in as many ways as they can, and trying to get in as many of those Raiola connection recruitments as they can while they have Dylan and
Nice.
soon to be Dayton on campus. Um, but a guy that, I think Nebraska's really in it now. Like just getting to
Oh
talk
yeah.
to him after that visit, like you said, national offers, the who's who's are in there. LSU's legitimately in there. Oklahoma's
Yeah.
legitimately in there. Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, all legitimately in there. You and I talked before the weekend. Notre Dame is a school that's been there for a while. They might be fading a little
Yep.
bit. But Nebraska's legit in. Like again, there's very few programs he's seen multiple times, and he's already now scheduled to see Nebraska twice in 2 months. I think he's going to be probably back in the spring if that second visit goes well. And Nebraska's getting their ducks in a row too. Like you said, these dominoes are falling quick. We're seeing
Yep.
pretty much most everyone has a 26 QB if you're at the P4 level.
Yeah.
It feels
Definitely.
like it. Or at least a lot of those dominoes have fallen. But at the 27 level, it's like Nebraska's getting ahead, and this seems to be a guy that they're closing in on it, and it seems to be a guy that they're going to be high on moving forward.
Yeah, one of the things I want to mention too that Trey mentioned to me when I talked to him after this visit was he said that he really liked Nebraska's offense being a pro style offense. And that's something that when you think about quarterbacks making decisions down the road is what type of offense you play. And if a kid, I like that he identified that early, right? That this is the type of offense that will suit him well. He said he knows they're going to use tight ends, they're going to use receivers, they'll have a strong run game as it continues to get built up as well. So that's also something to watch, is that Nebraska's offense becoming a selling point to a certain style of quarterback as well.
Yeah, and it's and everyone has their choice on what type of quarterbacks they want. And it's such a good point too, because with what Dylan's doing right now, and obviously not everyone's going to be Dylan, like coming in year one and
Right.
doing what he's doing within the offense. But this is an offense that challenges you, that forces you to make full field reads, that forces
Mm-hmm.
you to stand with the ball and in protection, like 5, 6 man protections. You're not going to have a bunch of loaded, 8 man boxes, or you're not going to be making quick reads or being told, hey, just throw it to the out. Like, you're forced to
Right.
make reads. You're forced to, and it challenges quarterbacks to down the line. Again, it'll help them at the NFL level because you see what Nebraska is
Mm-hmm.
doing offensively, just in terms of the scheme, not in terms of the success. I understand success has been up
Right.
and down, But in terms of the scheme, you look at what Nebraska's doing and you see what's happening across the NFL. It's very similar in terms of just like the types
Yeah.
of routes that are being run, the types of formations that are out there, the types of read that the quarterbacks at the NFL level are forced to make. They're forcing Dillon to make those right now. And like I said, not every quarterback's that. There's training wheels for a reason on these type of offense. They've taken the training wheels off for Dillon, but this is the type of offense that is going to become attractive. It is attractive to, like you're saying, a certain type of quarterback, and it's that quarterback that has those pro aspirations and that is sees this as the best path to it. There's multiple paths to the NFL,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and I think that the thing too is that this gives you a glimpse too into a little bit of what their plan is long term with the offense too, right? Is that you get your the kind of the first big, kind of pro style pocket passing quarterback in Dylan Raiola, and then you're like, okay, well, eventually it's going to have to be what's next. And I like that they are also like working quickly and ahead on this, right? And so it doesn't feel like you're going to get into a situation like, remember years ago we had Tommy Armstrong for 4 years, and all of a sudden it was like, well, who's next, right? Like it felt like that was always an issue. I don't think that's going to be an issue with these guys.
for sure, yeah, they have a vision of what they want. And you see the guys committed right now. TJ Latif can operate within the offense, like does a good job of making his reads and getting the throws out to the open receiver. Dayton Raiola, raw, young dude, still developing, but you see
Mm-hmm.
that all there. He's got the same like little processing skills that Dylan does. He does the
Right.
little quarterback things right at a young age. And now, Trae Taylor and the guys they're looking at in 2027. Yeah, Glenn Thomas and the staff clearly have a vision for what they want.
Yeah.
Um, Switching gears a little bit, Greg, you were out in Nixa this weekend going to see the new number one player in the 2026 class, Jackson Cantwell. Has been the number two player in the country until Jakeem Stewart reclassified. And so now Jackson just bumps up to one. Just thoughts getting to see him in person, kind of what one obviously on the player. And, there's been a lot of
Mm-hmm.
questions about like where is he at relative to the teams he's playing? Is it kind of like like a large dude dominating competition, or is it more of like and where is he at as well? Because going into the year, it felt like there was another step needed developmentally.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting, and this is honestly the thing that surprised me the most, is that he is not actually playing as like small of players as I thought, which I think is a good thing. And I've seen a couple, like I've been out on the road basically every week, and I've seen that like a Tavian St. Clair, our number one quarterback and player in the country, Bryce Underwood, the number two, like those dudes are playing some iffy competition out in Michigan and Ohio, respectively. I actually think that Jackson's competition was a step up actually from where those guys were. They play in I think it's 6A, I want to say, in Missouri. So they're actually in the same classification with like Lee Summit North and CBC, and Cardinal Ritter and those schools. Like it's really interesting. Like they're just tucked away down in Southwest Missouri. So that was surprising to me, but ultimately a good thing because I got to see a little bit better, get a better feel a little bit, I think, for like Jackson as a player. And so I think that it's interesting. He's still developing and there is still development left to happen there. It's similar in a way to Grant Bricks last year, I think, because Nixa does not throw the ball a lot, but part because they don't have to, because they have a good sized offensive line led by Jackson, obviously, and they like to run behind that. And they've got a really talented running back at the high school level as well. But I think that you can clearly see the athleticism out there when you see him move. Even as someone who does not have to pass protect a lot, I was surprised at how well he moved his feet and the punch that he has when he's protecting the passer. He did it a few times. He's a dominant run blocker, and you would expect that when he gets his hands on kids, like they're going the way that he wants them to go. And so I think that he's every bit as worthy of that 5-star ranking and now being the number one player in 2026. When it comes to his recruitment, it's interesting, right? I think that he was at Georgia this past weekend for their game, and it was his fifth visit down to Georgia that he told me before he went down there. I got the vibe just from talking to him, talking to other people down there, that you've got a little bit of a separation happening. So I think that Georgia, Oregon, Missouri, and then Nebraska is kind of in that mix, kind of fighting to get in there with them, but still always gets mentioned. and then it's everybody else. Now, the everybody else also includes LSU and Alabama, who he still is supposed to visit this year. So those are a couple of schools, obviously, that hey, you have a good visit down in Baton Rouge, it can change up everything,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And we know how that goes. Same thing in Tuscaloosa, right? And so we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. But I do think that that group of schools is really the focus at this point.
For sure. And with Nebraska, they're a school that if people ask, is Nebraska a legit contender there? And I've always said yes, and this isn't like a David Sanders thing where they've come in. Nebraska was there early, actually. Nebraska's
Yeah,
been
that
there for a
helps.
while,
Yeah.
and before he came into the forefront or like into focus as like, okay, the top junior tackle, like all of this, he was making visits back when he was a sophomore, I think even a freshman to
Yeah.
Nebraska. Nebraska's been on him for a while. They have multiple staff members recruiting him. He's got really good relationships with staff members. And something to keep in mind here that I actually had multiple members of the track team text me and let me know. They were
Mm-hmm.
like, look into the background of Coach St. Clair, Nebraska's head track and field coach. He was previously the throws coach, got promoted up. He currently trains a few Olympian throwers
Uh-huh.
and has had a few under his belt. Obviously, his resume at Nebraska the past 2 years they've been the indoor champs, and they've done a good job building up that program. And there's a relationship that's already starting to form there as well. And if you remember, Jackson Cantwell's a guy that shattered the sophomore record in the
Oh yeah,
shot
he's
put.
awesome. Yeah.
He's an incredible thrower, like a
Incredible
jaw
thrower.
dropping
Yeah.
thrower. I had it put into context for me the other day. By a friend who down in Texas. I covered David Hicks back, the David Hicks Jr., a former five-star defensive lineman, now plays at Texas A&M. He's one of the strongest humans I've ever been around. Just his hand strength and upper body strength. Jackson Cantwell's throwing the shot put 20 feet further than he is. Like that's just
That's
absurd.
insane. Yeah, he is a freak athlete. Like that term gets said a lot, but in this case, like it could not like apply more. And one note though that I definitely want to make sure I say about like kind of Cantwell in Nebraska as well is that it was said multiple times to me over the weekend that that Nebraska definitely they're a big impression with the facilities. The facilities they say are the best that they've seen, and that everyone else includes Georgia. Like the anecdote that I got, which is fascinating to me, is that Nebraska has those float pods, right? Like for the recovery. Georgia has one of those. Nebraska has seven. And so, like the way that they went above and beyond with that new facility and how they're able to use it to help benefit student athletes, I think is something that sticks in his mind as well.
For sure. And he's approaching this recruitment like a pro. Again, another question I kind of
Oh yeah.
had there about Jackson was like, hey, why is he signing with an agent that's just going to drive it? Like, first, I do want to get this out there too in some type of public forum. People out there talking about one, him trying to drive up the price and like
Doesn't
NIL
need to.
wise, and two, just being like, oh, he's just in it for the money. He's the number one player in the country. There was always going to be a market for
Oh
him.
yeah.
He was going to get money. Do you want him to make an uninformed decision, or would you rather him have his ducks in a row? And again, wherever he's going, it doesn't matter where he's going to school. Pick any of these contenders. He's going to get paid. He's in.
Oh yeah.
This is like it's going to happen. That's not a deciding factor in this recruitment by any means. And I think that scares some people when you say NIL recruitment. It's like, no, if you want to get a 5-star, if you want to get a top 100 player, you have to use money. Money's required there.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter, excuse me, anymore. Like that's not a how do I say this? That is not any type of reflection on his character or his parents' character or anything like that. It is just the reality of the situation. And I did ask him about that point blank about the NIL thing and why he wanted to sign with the agency. He basically just said, I'm gonna have to deal with this at some point. I know it's gonna be a big thing. So I need to why not be represented by the Rosenhaus group and have the best agent, the most well-known agent be a part of this, right? And I think that another point on that too is that I think that people have to kind of wrap their arms around when we're talking about a 5-star at a premium position, whether it's quarterback, edge rusher, or offensive tackle. We are talking seven figures and up every single time. Like no matter which of these schools that they pick, that's what we're talking about. So it's just, and the schools all know this. It's the reality of the situation, and just kind of where we are in today's college football.
For sure. Yeah, again, this doesn't scare off any school more like
No.
fan bases get scared off by it and fan bases have their own opinions, but
Yeah.
schools understand the business, schools understand how this game is played. And Nebraska plays the game too. Like again, I like
Yes.
we can say what we want. Like Nebraska does play the game. They do a good job of doing it. of balancing everything,
Mm-hmm.
but they do play that game. Greg, appreciate your time a ton. Before we get out of here, just wanted to talk about two guys close to us, local guys.
Yeah.
I was out to see Tory Pittman and Kylonn Haynie. Kylonn had his best game, I think, of his career so far. And you can see those highlights over at InsideNebraska.com. We'll check my Twitter feed as well for some of those clips. But an incredible performance from him. And watching Tory playing both ways, just again, really impressed with what I've seen from both of those guys early on. Both already have Nebraska offers, have frequented Nebraska's campus. I think, I'm sure you agree at this point, it's Nebraska's recruitment to lose. Both of those recruitments
Yeah.
right now, they're far and away in the favorites for both. And Tory's got a bigger recruitment right now, but Kylon's going to get some offers of his additional offers of his own. I want to focus on Tory for a bit. We currently have him as the number 64 player in the country at Rivals, one of the top safeties in the country. He's a guy that I watch him, I've seen other players in the state. Again, I've seen again a bunch. You've seen a bunch of guys too. You see a guy and you watch him move and you're like, that's a future college player, that's a future potential NFL player, like a guy that just moves differently. That's Tory right now. Like you see him
Right.
moving around on both sides, and he may not be like lighting up the stat sheet or anything, but from the safety position, he's always in the right spot. He's constantly getting open at receiver, even if the ball isn't getting there. Had some like incredible catches, good body awareness. How much higher can he climb in the ranks, and like what's the ceiling on him?
Yeah, I think that it's very high. Like I think that he could be a guy that's like a top 30, like top 20 type player. I think he's got a lot of talent. And I think that I love that you called out that he's not necessarily lighting up the stat sheet. And so if you just look and you say, okay, let me look at the stats and kind of do a quick drive-by of like, is he that good? I don't think that does him justice. Like you do have to see him move around out there. And he, to me, when we talk about like what he looks like a future college player, he just looks like he fits so perfectly the modern game of a safety that can do a whole lot of stuff out there on the field for you and do it well. Like I think he can play in the deep third for you. I think he could come down in the box and make tackles. I think he could even have some blitzing in his future as well. Like I think the world of him and think that he could do a lot out there. And I think that Nebraska has done a great job of getting out in front on this one. I think there's a lot of people within the state that want to see him stay home. So I do think eventually that's how it's going to be. But he is going to continue to rack up offers from around the country as his tape gets out there more and more because you have to watch him to actually truly appreciate what's going on with him. But yeah, the sky's the limit for what type of ranking he could end up having.
For sure. Yeah. I think, again, like you said, I think the world of him as well. And I think
Yeah.
he's a guy that, again, had landed his first SEC offer a couple weeks ago. That's not going to be the last one. USC's already in there.
No.
Notre Dame's going to get in there. I'm assuming sometime soon because they're monitoring pretty closely.
Mhm.
He's going to rack up these offers. But yeah, Nebraska's way out ahead. They've had him on campus a bunch of times already, just like they have with Kylonn. Yeah, I think again, like it's very down the line, and we spent a lot of time today focusing on 2027s, but Nebraska is setting up a really good recruiting foundation. Like this is just not
Yep.
something we could have talked about with previous staffs of like you have an idea. They picked up Dveyoun today. You and me back in the summer could have been like, all right, if we want to pinpoint which receivers Nebraska is going to get in the cycle, Dveyoun felt like he was in that group. It was
Yeah.
Nebraska and Minnesota. And I do want to mention that was a big recruiting win for Nebraska over Minnesota. Minnesota wanted him badly. They had him on campus three times between the summer and his commitment to Nebraska. Nebraska only had him twice. Once to camp back in June, second time this time. But Garrett McGuire's relationships, Nebraska's work there ultimately won out. But yeah, I just want to close on this point of just like Nebraska has a plan, and you and I, we could run down this
Mhm.
hypothetical list of like, all right, every single position, there's like a handful of guys that we feel like Nebraska's either near or at the top for
Right.
at practically every single position in 2026. And looking ahead to 2027, they have a good group of like, all right, these are the top targets already established.
Yeah, but another reason why this is so important is we talk about, we always talk about kind of them starting to build momentum on the field. And you always think about like, how can that then translate to say the 2025 class? Like, are there guys that they're going to be able to get, flip targets and are they going to be able to get in on this big time receiver or this offensive tackle because of what Dylan's doing or something like that? But we have to remember that they are not just recruiting for 25, it's also 26. And I still maintain that one of the things that's going to happen under Matt Rule at Nebraska when this program really takes off is that there'll be guys like Dveyoun that they land early that are going to blow up later but they were able to close them down really quick because they identified them early, and those kids already see the trajectory of the program. That's a real good sign for Nebraska, is that they're starting to not have to push so hard to say, hey, trust us, we're going in the right direction, because now the constant talk about the program from kids out the visit weekends is that the direction of the program is going the right way, and we believe that Matt Rhule is going to turn this thing around. They're in a great position right now, not just for the current class, but even beyond, and that's why we ended up talking about the future so much.
For sure. But Greg, we appreciate your time a ton. As always, it's a blast to have you on. Yeah, I think you're already so far the guest we've had on the most. So whatever, we're gonna do some type of jacket like SNL does, or one of those shows.
Nice.
We're gonna get a little jacket. But appreciate your time as always, and yeah, looking forward to catching up soon.
Hey, good, always good to be back, man. Have a good one.